the devil is a friend of mine. I get home before daylight, just might get some sleep tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back David Crathwall.
Good morning. It's Friday already. I don't know how that happened. We have a new record. Mark Johnson and Eric Solden both wore ties the entire week. That's news. You know, yeah, I hear it. I hear it. That's the way I feel. I'm with you. I have to tell you a little story this morning to introduce our special guest, and I promised to make it short, so I will. In 1979, I was a sixth grade teacher, and I saw an Apple II, and I had to have the Apple II, so I bought one and took it home, started programming, which turns out was probably the most interesting thing you could do with a computer back in 1979. And it really changed my life. And about 10 years later, I found myself at Apple Computer, moved out from Boston, and took a job out here. And I was out in the first week doing that sort of relocation thing and having dinner at a restaurant. My family was still in Boston. And I saw Steve Jobs across on the other side of the restaurant having dinner. And I thought, I really should just sort of walk over and interrupt his dinner and tell him, you know, thank you, and you know, you've changed my life. And I sort of thought about that for a while. I thought, that's really rude. And it probably happens to him all the time, and I don't want to be like that. So I didn't do it. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that I hesitated, because it gives me an opportunity to thank him this morning in a public setting among people who probably understand that better than anyone else on the planet. So it's a special pleasure this morning to introduce and thank a person who has changed so many of our lives, Steve Jobs. Have at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate your not interrupting me from my dinner with what was hopefully a beautiful woman. I wanted to come and just have a chat this morning. I know you've been getting lots of presentations all week, so I didn't want to do a big fancy presentation. But what I want to do is just chat. And so we get to spend 45 minutes or so together, and I want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. I have opinions on most things, so I figured if you just want to start asking some questions, we'll go to some good places. Just to set the tone a little bit, I'm actually pretty excited about the way things are going. I think that there are some really good people whom you met this week running the key areas of Apple now. And I think they're making enormous progress towards executing what is a pretty clear strategy. And that strategy revolves around one fundamental concept, which is to make some really great products. And I believe very firmly that there is still a very sizable market for some really great products, and there are some giant holes that we can fill with your help. So I think we are embarked down a course to, after a hiatus of several years, turning this thing around to make some really good and unique products. We need a lot of software for them. That's where you come in. So I am open to entertaining any of your questions, and hope you have some good ones this morning.
What about OpenDoc?
What about OpenDoc?
Yeah.
Yeah? What about it? It's dead, right?
Huh?
It's dead, right?
Well, I don't know. I spent a lot of time working on it. And
Yeah. Well, you know, let me say something this sort of generic. I know some of you spent a lot of time working on stuff that we put a bullet in the head of. I apologize. I feel your pain. But Apple suffered for several years from lousy engineering management. I have to say it. And there were people that were going off in 18 different directions, doing arguably interesting things in each one of them. Good engineers, lousy management. And what happened was, you look at the farm that's been created with all these different animals going in different directions, and it doesn't add up. The total is less than the sum of the parts. And so we had to decide what are the fundamental directions we're going in, and what makes sense and what doesn't. And there were a bunch of things that didn't. And microcosmically, they might have made sense. Macrocosmically, they made no sense. And you know, the hardest thing is, when you think about focusing, right? You think, well, focusing is saying yes. No. Focusing is about saying no. Focusing is about saying no. And you've got to say no, no, no. And when you say no, you piss off people. And they go talk to the San Jose Mercury, and they write a shitty article about you. You know? And it's really a pisser. Because you want to be nice. You don't want to tell the San Jose Mercury, the person that's telling you this, you know, just was asked to leave, or this or that, or this or that. So you take the lumps. And Apple's been taking their share of lumps for the last 6 months in a very unfair way. And it's been taking them, you know, like an adult. And I'm proud of that. And there's more to come, I'm sure. There's more to come. I mean, some of these, I read these articles about some of these people that have left. I know some of these people. They haven't done anything in 7 years. And, you know, they leave, and it's like, you know, it's like the company's going to fall apart the next day. And so, you know, I think there'll be stories like that that come and go. But focus is about saying no. And the result of that focus is going to be some really great products where the total is much greater than the sum of the parts. And OpenDoc, I mean, I was for putting a bullet in the head of OpenDoc. A, I didn't think it was great technology, but B, it didn't fit. The rest of the world isn't going to use OpenDoc. And I think as a container strategy, there's some stuff in the Java space that's much better. And even the OpenDoc guys were basically trying to rewrite the whole thing in Java anyway, and which was a restart. So it didn't make sense. Yes, sir.
Steve, what do we do about the press? I mean, the Wall Street Journal reporters get up in the morning, sell Apple short, and then go write stories about us. And it's clear that it's a perception versus reality problem.
Yeah.
They don't know shit about operating systems. They don't know anything about tools. They don't know what's going on in the future. They don't know that we're building icebergs, and you build them from the bottom up.
Sure. You know, I'm sure that a lot of you have had this experience where you're changing, you're growing as a person, and people tend to treat you like you were 18 months ago. And it's really frustrating sometimes when you're growing up and you're becoming more capable, and you've solved, you know, maybe you had some personality quirks you've kind of gotten over, whatever it may be, and people still treat you like you were a year to 18 months ago. It can be very frustrating. Well, it's the same with a company. It's the same with the press. The press is going to have a lag time. And the best thing that we can do about the press is to you know, embrace them, do the best we can to educate them about the strategy, but to keep our eye on the prize. And that is turning out some great products, communicating directly with our customers as best we can, getting the community of people that are going to make this stuff successful, like yourselves, in the loop so you know everything, and just marching forward one foot in front of the other. And the press will take care of it. It's like the stock price. The press and the stock price will take care of themselves. By the end of this year, it's going to look quite different. And you know, when you get, I mean, I'm like an old man now in this industry, and I've seen the ups and downs, and when you see enough of them, you know that's going to happen. So when you get up in the morning and the press is selling Apple short, go out and buy some shares. You know? That's what I would do. That's what I have done. Sure.
Yeah, Apple certainly has a tradition of introducing new technologies that become standards. But lately, Apple seems more apologetic about being different, and it is proud about being different. And as a developer, you start to feel the same way. And I just wonder, you know, 13 years after introducing the Macintosh, what Apple can do, Apple can do to get its balls back.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I have a little different point of view on that. I think Apple's had its head in the sand for the last many years. Excuse me. There is there has been so much that's happened in terms of network computing, as an example, that Apple's completely missed out on. The Mac is probably one of the least network computer communities in the world in terms of really making use of powerful networks. I mean, like when Next joined Apple, right? Next has an extremely sophisticated network infrastructure for doing network computing compared to Apple. And you know, even now we struggle getting the Apple folks to understand it, because the Mac has been, because of all this proprietariness in every way, because of the attitude of arrogance that we can not only invent our own networking, but invent our own this, and invent our own that, and invent our own this. It's in its own little world, and the rest of the world, with so much investments, passed it by. And so we need to bring the Mac up into the modern world in many areas like network computing. And to do that, because we weren't first, because we didn't set the standards and they've already been cast in stone, we're going to have to use them. So I think the wisdom here is not to say that we've got to invent everything ourselves. The wisdom here is to know what 10% or 20% or 30% probably at most of the stuff we have to invent and what we should go use that exists. We didn't invent PostScript, did we? We got a laser writer out of it. And we were the first out there with the laser writer. So I think this whole notion of being so proprietary in every facet of what we do has really hurt us. And again, the management and the vision that we had encouraged that. Encouraged people to go, you know, reinvent the wheel out there our own way. And yeah, it might be 10% better, but usually it ended up being about 50% worse because of there's a lot of smart people that don't work at Apple too.
Well, the only other thing I'd like to add is that I think it's important that Apple be perceived as different, because if Apple just says, we're just like everybody else but better, that really doesn't say anything at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's good that Apple's perceived as different. I think it's important that Apple's perceived as much better. And if being different is essential to doing that, then we have to do that. But if we could be much better without being different, that'd be fine with me. I want to be much better. I don't care about being different. We'll have to be different in some ways to be much better. But that's the prize. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, but I think Apple needs to articulate those differences as well. And I agree that the goal is to be better, but for the general public, it has to be a whole lot better before it's noticed, and
right.
It has to be in some ways different.
It has to be a whole lot better. Yes.
Good morning. You said in your opening ground rules that there were lots of holes that Apple couldn't necessarily do themselves without this community. Mm-hmm. As a visionary, do you think you could spend a couple minutes either enumerating or talking about those holes?
Sure. Much of the great leverage of using computers these days is using them not just for computationally intensive tasks, but using them as a window into communication-intensive tasks, as you know. And never have I seen something more powerful than this computation combined with this network technology that we now have. So not only networks throughout an organization, but of course the wide area networks through the internet. And I just want to focus on